Planning a Disney vacation can be really overwhelming. So today we're going to go over the top 10 questions you really ought to ask yourself and make sure you can answer in order to be able to make your trip the best trip it can be for you. This is episode 27. I'm Sariah.
I'm Aurora.
And together we're just your average Disney travelers. All right, so whether you're a planner or not, when you're going to the Disney parks, you kind of have to be a planner these days. And so even if you're a planner at heart, if you're not as familiar with those destinations, it can be overwhelming. And especially if you're not a planner at all, especially overwhelming. You don't even know what you need to know sometimes. And so we're going to go over kind of like the list of things that you really need to kind of answer for yourselves in order to be able to plan that trip the way that'll work best for your family. And we'll get going. And now the first thing is a question that isn't going to really make our 10 questions because I think it's one that is kind of obvious, but you'd be surprised because when I was a travel agent, there were a lot of times that people were confused about which destination they were talking about. They would say, oh, I want to go to Disney World. And they were expecting to go to California, or the opposite, Disneyland in Florida. No. Disneyland is in Florida. Disney World is in California, or Disney World. I just did the opposite. Disneyland is in California. If we had a blooper reel, that would be like one of our first real bloopers.
I can make one.
You want to make a blooper reel for us?
Probably most of it is me having no idea what's happening.
Okay.
As you so said in the very first episode.
Disneyland in California. Disney World in Florida.
Are you sure about that?
I am positive. And not only are they different because of the destinations, the locations are different. They are completely different types of destinations as far as size and what they have to offer and the way that you want to plan before going. And so know your destination and then ask yourselves these questions. Rory, what's the first question?
When are you going?
Right. So that's a good question to know, or the answer to know. When are you going to travel? And that is not always as easy as it sounds because sometimes it gets really complicated with people's schedules.
Like whether, like people's just schedules, but then also like whether you want to go for not as good weather time, but
what's your priority? Are you
like
trying
the crowds you tend to be not as big with like worse weather.
So are you trying to go for the time that has the best weather? That probably, or are you going to try to go for when there's lower crowds? Are you trying to, are you going for a specific event? And then of course, like we started to talk about the scheduling. You have certain times of the year that you just can't get time off, whether it's for school or work. So, what are your parameters? When can you go? So look at your calendar, figure it out. When can you travel? And
then keep going from there.
Yeah. So pick your dates. When are you traveling? All right. What's the next question?
How are you going to get there?
Yeah. And a lot of this might just depend on where you're going.
Yeah.
How far it is from you.
We used to have to fly, but now we would just drive to Disneyland.
Yeah.
But we still fly to Disney World.
Yeah. Disney World's too far for us to drive. You could technically do it, but it would take a couple of days and I would rather be in the parks.
Trip.
Yeah. Road trips aren't my favorite. I get too motion sickness.
I just sleep.
You sleep. Yeah, you do.
I just lay
put in your
down
headphones and
sleep. I'll pay attention.
Yeah. But I would much rather take that time off that we're taking to be in the parks.
Yeah.
At our destination. Some people like the road trips and that's definitely an option. But yeah, how are you gonna get there? Even from here, we do have the option to fly if we really wanted to. It's just now that
it's cheaper and it's 6 hours away.
Yeah, so now it's doable to drive to Disneyland for us. But yeah, so decide where you're going or how you're going to get to where you're going, and then also factor in if you are flying. Are you going to need to rent a car once you get there, or are you going to Uber from the airport to your hotel, or is there a shuttle? If you're going to Disney World this year, you could still use Magical Express. So how are you going to get from the airport to Disney, whichever destination it is, And if you're staying on property, if you're planning to really just do a Disney trip, once you're there, you really don't need transportation. I mean, you can use the provided transportation, but you wouldn't really need to rent a car necessarily. Some people still choose to, but yeah, but if you have other things you plan to do while you're in that area, then you might. So figure that out. What kind of transportation are you going to be using to get there, including all the way to your hotel?
Yeah.
What's next?
What is your budget? That is a very big,
yeah,
a very, very
important
big
question.
Yeah, important question.
And sometimes what your budget is will determine some of those previous things, like where you're going. Less expensive sometimes to go to Disneyland because it's a smaller place. You don't have to be there as many days, or like however many days you plan to take off might be determined by your budget. But at this point, when you know where you want to go, how you're getting there, when you're traveling, figure out what your budget is for sure, because now we're going to start looking at picking out things like, well, we'll get to it in a second, but your other elements to your package and your travel. But it's important to have a budget because it's really easy to go over budget if you're not being careful.
Oh yeah.
Set yourself a budget, try to be as realistic as possible, draw up some mock like flight plan. Like I usually, even if it's too far out to book my flights, I will kind of look and get an estimate of how much I think it might cost. So that way I have it set aside for the flight portion. Same with hotels, all of those things. So ticket packages, just kind of plan it out. There are lots of blogs you can look up to get estimates for things like, tips on budgeting for food and things like that. There's a great website I like to go to. It's called allears.net, and it has the menus for all of the Disney parks, Disneyland and Disney World. And it has prices and the menu items. Sometimes it has photos so you can see what the meal looks like and get an idea of portion sizes. If it doesn't have a picture, it's kind of hard to tell the portion sizes, because that does make a difference for us. I know a lot of times we are able to share things, and so knowing whether or not it'll be big enough to share. But you can start kind of getting an idea of what you would most likely be spending, and what the costs would be by doing a little bit of that research. Anyways, yeah, so a budget, it's a big thing. Tip on some of that is, if you can ahead of time be setting aside money and stuff, you can purchase Disney gift cards using a Target red card to get 5% off of that, and then use that to pay for booking your package or your tickets, or when you get there, your food. I have previously on this podcast said that with all the mobile ordering, one thing I didn't like was that you couldn't pay with gift cards. That has changed. One blessing from COVID was that they actually added that feature. So you can actually load gift cards to that and use it to pay for mobile ordering your meals. And so that's awesome. That was really good news when I heard that. I thought, yes, I will use that because that saves money since I get those gift cards at a little discount. So that kind of really knocks off 5% off your whole trip. But there's other ways too. You can look up other savings. We're not going to get into total on that, but having a budget, and if you have a hard time sticking to a budget, doing it with the gift cards helps, because then you can't spend more than you have. So yeah. Anyways, okay, next.
Where should you stay?
Yeah.
We kind of talked a bit.
We did a little last week. Last week we talked about at least whether you want to stay on property or off property.
Yeah. Based
on where you're going. And so that will help. But even then you get to choose, you have lots of choices whether you're choosing on property or off property. So figure out what, when you have done travel in the past, what has worked well for your family? What size of space do you need? How much time do you anticipate spending in that space? And how much time do you think you'll be at the parks? Do you feel like you're going to be there enough to really have a nicer place with more amenities that you'll be able to take advantage of? Or do you think that it's not really going to matter because you're really just there to sleep, shower, and head out again? But obviously you need to pick a place to stay. And these kinds of things you want to do in as far in advance as you can, just because depending on when you're planning on going, they can book up pretty quickly. If it's, say, during a break, like school breaks get really busy, or holidays, which are often school breaks too. But yeah, it's kind of important to get an idea. Don't wait till last minute to book your place to stay, because you will be left with few options.
Yeah. Next is, how many days will you be in the parks?
Yeah. So,
and like, which park will you be in which day, since you now have to reserve that?
Yeah. So that was so those were two separate questions. So first, how many days do you want to be in the parks? And are you going to want hoppers or one park per day? And, you know, and I think with that is when you know your travel dates and you're looking at your calendar and everything, some people just automatically, well, we're going to be in the parks every day. Well, consider maybe having a rest day so that you're not go the whole time. It is exhausting. And so if you have a rest day, maybe to enjoy your resorts, which might factor into where you're going to stay, that is something to consider. So you might not necessarily need to have park tickets for every single day of your vacation. That might be overkill. And so, you know, if you're only going for a couple of days, and that's fine, go. You can sleep after your vacation. But if you're going for a week, you know, maybe take a day to rest. However you plan to plan it, or maybe you don't necessarily need a rest day. Maybe you're just planning on going partial days every day. And so then maybe you would want a ticket every day.
Yeah.
But yeah, how many days of that trip do you want to be in the parks? Because that's the size of ticket you're going to get, and whether it'll be hoppers. The next question, like you said, is figuring out which park you'll be in which day. Starting now, since COVID, both Disney World and Disneyland requires us to make a park pass reservation for any day we're going. So to enter a park, you need a ticket. You also need a pass. And that is something that you reserve online. Again, you want to do it as soon as you possibly can. As soon as you have park tickets, get park pass reservations, even if you're not positive, because you can switch them up if they're available. But if you wait and try to book to make your reservations, the closer you get to it, the fewer options you'll have. The last few weeks, with all the spring breaks and stuff going on, they have been all taken. And I think like what I've seen is there's only been, for several days, there was only one park available, Epcot. Epcot was the only place you could go. You were only going to Epcot. It didn't matter how long you were there, you were only going to Epcot. And then if you had a hopper, then you could hop over after 2:00, but you couldn't start in any of the other parks, which meant if you wanted to go to Hollywood Studios, you had to wait to hop. And that meant you would not be eligible to get passes for Rise of the Resistance. You have to start your day in that park to get that. So if you didn't make reservations ahead of time and were not able to start in that park, you were not riding Rise of the Resistance. And so things like that, it's important to plan ahead. Get yourself on the calendar. You can switch it up as long as there's availability, but you need to get yourself some days where you want to be. Plan out as best as you can, adjust as you need to as you go along, but get yourself reservations. Otherwise, you may not get to go where you want to go.
Yep.
All right.
So just get everything early. Just book everything early.
Yeah, and like I said, this is kind of the Disney parks now. You have to be a planner. It didn't used to be that way. You used to be able to be spontaneous. Disney World has been going in this direction already, with all of the advanced like fast pass selections and things like that. Did I say Disneyland again? That was Disney World. World.
I think you said Disney World.
Yeah, Disney World has been going in that direction already. Disneyland has still been able to be fairly spontaneous, but now it's going to need park reservations too. And so I don't know for sure if it'll stay that way, but I would guess that it will, because it gives Disney a better idea of how many people to expect, and that helps them to prepare for that better, like having enough cast members on hand, having enough food on hand, things like that. I don't see them going back on that. I don't see them deciding, oh, we don't need to make reservations anymore. They might, but I would expect that this is probably one of those changes that is going to stay.
Yeah.
So we had to be planning. Which this is not always a bad thing.
Yeah. It helps not just randomly, spontaneously planning a trip.
Yeah, I mean, and if you are,
it's not a good idea for you at the moment.
And if you are planning a spontaneous trip, just understand you're going to have to be flexible. You can't be picky. You're going to take what you can get, if it's even available, because with a reduced capacity, some days are selling out anyways. But if it's available and you can go, You're going to go where you can get in and get a hopper so that you can hop after 2 o'clock to a different park if you want to do more than just the park you can get in. But just understand that that's how it's going to be for, at least for a while.
Yeah.
So
So how do you want to eat?
yeah, and this can really affect your budget. So if your budget is tight and you're looking at, okay, I've got airfare and I might even need a rental car part of that time, and I'm gonna want to stay at these places to stay and all these days in the parks. One thing that's really easy to kind of help your budget is how you plan to eat. Disney is great that they will let you bring food and drinks into the park. And so you can pack in whatever snacks and sandwiches and things like that you want to have. If you're at Disneyland, it's also very easy to get off property. Just exit the park, go across the street. There's Denny's, McDonald's. I think there's an IHOP up there right there too. There's a few places just literally right across the street. You can get something. It's less expensive than in the parks. So that's one way to save money too. And then just come right back in. Disney World doesn't have quite that. We talked about last time. Yeah. It'll take you a while to get off property, but you can pack in food. And even if you're flying there, you can have grocery delivery to your hotel room, and they have mini fridges. So you can have fruits and veggies and stuff to make sandwiches and things like that to take into the parks with you. And that's one way you can save a lot of money. If you are not looking at being super tight on the budget with food, then are you planning on eating all of your meals in the parks? Or are you looking at just eating, what are you bringing in a meal and eating one meal? How do you want to eat during your trip? I'm going to say right now, plan to have some snacks at the very least, because you get in those parks and they smell so good. They pump in the smells from the bakery. Like they kind of send you artificial smells to make you want to eat all that yummy stuff. But it's true. I mean, and even like if you're walking around, you're seeing people with their Dole Whips and churros and Mickey bars and turkey legs and all of that. And you know that these are iconic classic snacks, you're going to want to try it.
Yeah.
So plan to let yourself have an ice cream, let yourself get some popcorn, plan for some of that. Because even if you're packing in all of your meals, if you're able to buy a snack or two, then you'll feel like you're getting a little treat.
Yeah.
And those are less expensive than meals. But anyways, that would be my advice. Even if you're planning on packing in pretty much all your food, get some snacks. So anyways, yeah. So how you want to eat.
And then where do you want to eat?
Right. So if you plan on eating at some of the restaurants that are table service, which is your sit down, a waiter comes, takes your order restaurant, then you need to make reservations. Again, with the planning. If you plan to just do quick service or counter service meals, you really don't need to do there's nothing to make reservations for. But if you want any character meals, if you want any of these sit down meals, if you're doing any like say a dining package for a special viewing of a show or something like that, all of those need to be made in advance. If you wait till you get there, there is likely not to be availability. And at the best, you're going to be having a long wait to get into some of those table service restaurants. Chances are you won't get, most of the character meals probably won't have space. There might be a couple, depending on where you're at and everything. There's some that book quicker than others and might have some space. But for the most part, it'll be really hard to get any of those kinds of things if you have not planned ahead. Used to be, Walt Disney World would let you book your reservations for dining 180 days in advance. That's 6 months in advance. Talk about needing to plan, right? You need to know where you're going to be and all of that. But now, because of COVID, it's 60 days in advance. And that's the same as what Disneyland has had in the past. Don't know if it'll eventually revert back to 180 days, but for now it's 60 days, which is a little bit more reasonable. It's 2 months before you travel.
Yeah.
And I really recommend that whatever the booking date is, if it's 60 days or goes back to 180 days or somewhere in between, book it as soon as you can. Set your alarm for, if you're on the West Coast, that's 3 a.m. because it's 6 a.m. on the East Coast. But set your alarm and get that, because the hard to get spots, like some of the big popular ones, specific character meals and things are really hard to get. They go real fast. And if you even wait until you take a lunch break, they're gone, and so you want to try to get those as quickly as you can. Again, if you need to, you can switch them around based on availability. If there's availability, you can, but I'd reserve it if you think you want it. If you know when it's going to be, do it. All right.
What kind of fast pass do you want to use?
Okay, so this was specifically if you're going to Walt Disney World and if they have the Fast Pass Plus going, you want to know what your fast passes are going to be, because don't know if this is how it's going to be when it comes back, but before COVID, you would pre-select your fast passes before you even went on your trip. And again, depending on where you're staying, could depend on how long, far in advance. But if you're staying on Disney property at Walt Disney World, you could book your fast passes 60 days in advance. 2 months before you travel, you would know where you're going to have your fast passes each day. This is not how they did it at Disneyland. I don't know how it's going to be on either location when they come back, because we're not right now doing fast passes. So if you're traveling this year, chances are you don't have to worry about fast passes. But in the future, when you're traveling, be aware of what the program is. I'm assuming there will be some sort of fast pass program coming back, and it's likely that there might be some reservations that you need to make for them, just because we have seen that already at Disney World. So if you are going to be in that situation, plan for that. And the best thing to do is to know which rides or attractions you really need the fast passes for. Which are the ones that get the really long lines or super popular? So which ones do you want to make the priority and use a fast pass for, so you're not standing in a 3-hour line, you know? So do a little bit of research on that. And this kind of all plugs back to, if you do book with a travel agent or a travel planner, they can usually give you a lot of guidelines on this. They can help you, because not everybody is familiar with which rides are popular, and they change up sometimes. Sometimes, it's, I was surprised about a year or so before Disneyland closed. I was really surprised seeing like a swing to where Alice and Alice in Wonderland and the teacups were becoming super popular and had much longer waits than they had before. And it was just kind of like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that, so sometimes things just kind of change around a little bit. And so you want someone who's kind of got their finger on the pulse of the parks and knows what's hot and what's not. And so how to prioritize that. But if you don't use a travel planner, do some research, read some blogs, make sure they're current. Get on maybe some threads, some discussion boards that are, make sure you're looking at current, because what was news 2 years ago will not be the same as now. So find out what is happening right now, what the experiences are, where the wait times. And if you can download the apps for the parks, no matter when you're going, download them and start looking at the wait times. Any day you can pull up the wait times and see what the trends are. Is it a long wait at Peter Pan? Is it a long wait over at Thunder Mountain? Like you can kind of start seeing where the long waits are. Those are the ones you want the fast passes for. So so plan that ahead of time.
Yeah. And then do you want any extra things? Like just like the photo pass kind of stuff, just souvenirs,
parties. Yeah. Is there anything you need to book for one? So if there's dessert parties, if you want to get that, like you said, the photo pass packages or memory maker, it's called memory maker over at Disney World, photo pass over at Disneyland. But if you want to, do any tours, things like that, are you going to do anything outside of Disney? Are you going to go over to Universal or to the beach or to Knott's Berry Farm or medieval times or any of those kinds of things? What else do you want to plan into your trip? That's going to be a little extra, especially things that you need to make reservations for. Or need to budget the money for. So have an idea. Again, that's another thing that reading blogs and hearing other people's experiences and tips will help. Working with a travel, planner would help. But kind of get an idea of those extra things. And all of these are things you want to do well before you're traveling. If you're waiting until the last minute to answer any of these questions, you may not get to answer the question yourself. It'll be answered for you.
Yeah.
Is there any other thoughts you would say on any of these things?
I don't think so.
For kids, kids obviously don't need to do a lot of planning for their trips. But what are some of the things would you recommend kids think about before they go on their trips? Is there anything?
I don't know.
Like, would you recommend kids maybe look up what some of the rides are to see if they wanted to do them?
Well, as someone who hates researching, I would not suggest that.
Okay.
That's not a good thing for me to give advice.
What about like, would you recommend kids watch some of the Disney movies so they're familiar with what the characters are, what the storylines are?
Yeah,
maybe
that'd be fun.
Yeah. Anything else? Like, is there? I mean,
I don't really know.
Since you're not the planner, you don't care.
Yeah, and like I've just already gone so many times, like since I was young. So like,
yeah,
I
you
never
don't think about it.
Yeah, like when I was younger, I didn't like even like I didn't realize we were gonna go like Disney World. At least in my memory, I didn't think we're like in my
you just
memory.
Didn't realize.
Yeah, you told me that I already knew, but in my memory, I had no idea up until that point because.
That's all right.
My memory likes to edit itself.
Well, and when you're really young, there's really not much to do. But I wonder as a teen, I just wonder as a teen, is there something a teen might want to?
Just like know the rides, I guess. Though that's sort of something you do like on the way. Like I guess I don't know, like kind of learn a bit more about the rides, and then like kind of like make a list of these sound fun.
Yeah.
So like. And like don't like do a whole big thing, just kind of like look at it maybe.
Yeah, you don't have to map out every day, but just kind of get an idea.
Sort of like, just get a little bit of an idea, and then just go and then see for yourself.
And for parents, I think that one of the things that I usually tried to do is before a trip. I mean, if it was a surprise trip, we didn't really talk about it. But if there was a trip that, even if it would be like a hypothetical trip, they didn't know it was a real trip, but they thought it was a hypothetical trip.
With you, honestly,
you never know.
I never know because. You would be willing to just go to Disneyland like anytime.
Pretty much. Let's go now.
And then so then like with the hypothetical, I can't tell if like if you're actually going or willing to go like right then.
But what I would do though is we would, if we were talking hypothetical or not, talk about what would you want to do on a Disney day? Like what if we were going to Disneyland, what would be your favorite top things you'd want to do? And I try to make sure that I have an idea. Yeah. Well, I know. I mean, it's good. It's helpful because if they're, to find out what your kids like and what they don't like, so there's no point of making a huge effort to go to attractions that nobody really cares about going to.
Right.
And there may not be very many of those, but know if there are, and what are their must do's, what's the most important ones for them, so that you can make sure that they get their most important ones, for sure. And maybe even get to do it a couple times. But make those a priority. And so find out from each of your kids what they are interested in. And they may not know themselves, but maybe ask, do they think they would like to watch parades? Do they like to watch fireworks? Things like that. Find out, and make sure then you can plan on those things as part of your trip to make it magical for everybody.
Yeah.
So, all right. That's it. I forgot to mention at the start of this, awesome. Today, not just today, but a couple days ago, Disneyland opened. It's open now.
Oh yeah,
it's open. And we didn't even mention that, but yeah, so this is it. We're back.
Let's go.
I know. If only we lived in California. Well, that's all right. Anyways, it'll happen when it happens. But yeah, so it's back. Plan your trips, ask yourself these questions, and go have fun. Right?
Yep.
All right, great. Well, we'll see you next week.
See you.